Chapter 4. The Unraveling. The bowling alley was a relic from the 70s that time had forgotten. Wood-paneled walls yellowed from decades of cigarette smoke, neon signs advertising beers that weren't made anymore, and a sound system that wheezed out tinny versions of hits from another era. The air smelled of lane wax, stale beer, and desperation, but Zaph found comfort in its honesty. Unlike the Morrow's house with its calculated warmth, this place made no pretense about what it was, shabby, worn, and unapologetic. He sat on a molded plastic seat that squeaked beneath his weight, nursing a beer while watching Ted and Sue interact with their friends. They were different here, away from the privacy of their home, more guarded in their movements, more careful with their words. The perfect suburban couple with their perfect suburban friends, all surface and no depth. Except for Mike. Zaph noticed him immediately. Late 30s, broad-shouldered, with the focused gaze of a man who calculated odds and outcomes as naturally as breathing. Mike was one of Ted's work friends, something in sales if Zaph remembered correctly, though whether he sold insurance or cars or souls wasn't entirely clear. What was clear was the way Mike watched Sue. Not obviously, not crudely, but with the patient attention of a predator who knew his territory and was merely waiting for the right moment to strike. Sue was aware of the attention. It showed in the subtle adjustments to her posture whenever Mike approached, the way her laugh pitched slightly higher when he made a joke, the careful management of physical space between them, close enough to signal interest but not so close as to be obvious to the casual observer. Or to Ted, who appeared oblivious, too busy trying to impress a woman from Sue's office with tales of his technical prowess to notice the silent communication happening just feet away. First time bowling with the crew, Mike asked, sliding into the seat beside Zaph with 2 fresh beers, offering one with casual camaraderie. Zaph accepted the drink with a nod. Yeah, just what I needed after a rough week. Heard about your wife taking off. Mike's voice held the perfect blend of sympathy and masculine understanding. Women, right? Can't live with them, can't shoot them. He winked to soften the crude joke. Something like that, Zaph replied, taking a long pull from his beer. Seems like you know the Morrows pretty well. Mike's gaze slid to Sue, who was bent over to retrieve her ball, presenting a view that had drawn more than one appreciative glance. Known Ted since high school, Sue for almost as long. A pause weighted with meaning. They're an interesting couple. The emphasis on interesting told Zaph everything he needed to know. Mike was aware of Ted and Sue's recreational activities, possibly even a past participant. This was valuable intelligence. How so? Zaph asked, affecting innocent curiosity. Mike studied him for a moment, as if gauging whether Zaph was truly naive or playing some game. Let's just say they have an open-minded approach to marriage. I've noticed, Zaph said dryly. That drew a startled laugh from Mike. So you're already in the loop. He shook his head, respect mingling with something darker in his expression. Ted doesn't waste time, does he? How long have you been in town? A month. About that. Mike leaned closer, his voice dropping conspiratorially. Word of advice? Don't get attached to any of it. It's all just recreation for them. I've seen people get hurt. The warning might have been useful a month ago, before New Year's Eve, before Zaph's world had shattered and reformed into something harder and colder. Now it was merely confirmation of what he already suspected. I'm not the one who got attached, Zaph said, nodding almost imperceptibly toward Ted, who was now demonstrating what appeared to be a golf swing to the increasingly bored-looking woman beside him. Mike followed his gaze and nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. Your wife? Ex-wife, more or less. Mike whistled low. That's a new one. Usually it's the other way around. The wife gets possessive, not Ted. He took a thoughtful sip of his beer. Sue must be pissed. That's one word for it, Zaph agreed, watching as Sue returned from her turn, her gaze sweeping the room until it landed on Mike. Something passed between them, a silent communication loaded with promise. Mike caught the look and smiled, a predator scenting blood. Anyway, good games tonight. I should head out. He stood, casually adjusting his shirt. Nice meeting you, Zaph. I'm sure we'll see more of each other. Zaph watched him approach Sue, bending to whisper something in her ear that made her laugh, and glanced quickly at Ted, who remained oblivious. The night was reaching its predictable conclusion, pieces moving across the board exactly as Zaph had anticipated. Sue approached Zaph a few minutes later, her movements casual but her eyes bright with poorly concealed excitement. "Mike wants me to go home with him," she said without preamble. "But I wanted to check with you first since you're staying with us and, well, with everything that's happened." The pretense of consideration was almost laughable. She wasn't asking permission. She was establishing plausible deniability, ensuring Zaph couldn't later claim she'd hidden her intentions. "No," Zaph said, the word falling like a stone between them. Sue blinked, clearly not expecting this response. "Excuse me, you can't go with him." Zaph kept his voice calm, reasonable, though his heart had begun to hammer with the thrill of the game. "It wouldn't be right." Confusion and annoyance crossed Sue's face in rapid succession. "I don't understand. You and I aren't… I mean, we've only been together as part of I know." Zaph leaned forward, pitching his voice low enough that she had to move closer to hear him. "But after everything with Mary, after Ted invited me to stay with you both, it just doesn't feel right to see you with someone else." It was a masterful performance, just the right blend of vulnerability and possessiveness to unsettle her. Sue's expression shifted from confusion to a strange mixture of flattery and caution. I'll tell Mike another time then," she said finally, and Zaph could almost see the calculations happening behind her eyes. Was he developing feelings for her? Was this a complication or an opportunity? How would Ted react if he knew? Zaph nodded, allowing his relief to show. "Thank you. I just need time to process everything, you know." Sue touched his arm lightly, the gesture meant to comfort but carrying an undercurrent of something more proprietary. "Of course. We should get going anyway. Ted's had enough to drink." She moved away to collect her husband, leaving Zaph to savor the first thread pulling loose in the carefully woven fabric of their marriage. He watched as Sue approached Mike, delivering what was clearly disappointing news based on the man's frown and quick glance in Zaph's direction. Phase 3 had begun. The days that followed unfolded according to Zaph's careful design. He became a fixture in the Morrow household, a sympathetic ear for Ted's growing anxieties about Sue's distance, a comforting presence for Sue's frustrations with Ted's neediness. Each confided in him separately, painting pictures of marital dissatisfaction that mirrored each other in ways neither seemed to recognize. At night, when the house was quiet, Zaph would slip into Sue's room. Ted's irregular work hours, emergency computer repairs for businesses that couldn't afford downtime, provided ample opportunity for these clandestine encounters. What had begun as part of Zaph's revenge strategy had evolved into something more complex, though no less calculated. Sue had fallen under his spell, mistaking his methodical precision for passion, his controlled performance for genuine desire. "You can't let other men touch you anymore," Zaph told her one afternoon as they lay tangled in sheets still warm from their activities. The statement was delivered with quiet authority, as if it were a foregone conclusion rather than a demand. Sue propped herself up on one elbow, surprise evident in her features. "What? No other men? Not even Ted?" Zaph maintained eye contact, his expression serious. "If you let anyone else touch you, I'll leave." The ultimatum hung in the air between them, shocking in its audacity. This was a woman who, for years, had operated under rules of her own making, engaging with multiple partners while maintaining the security of her marriage. And now this young man, barely out of his teens, was attempting to rewrite those rules entirely. What Zaph hadn't anticipated was Sue's reaction. Rather than outrage or dismissal, her eyes dilated with excitement, her breath catching in her throat. The command, so different from her husband's passive acceptance of her behaviors, awakened something in her that she hadn't realized she craved. "Even Ted," she whispered, the question carrying the weight of years of marital dynamics. "Especially Ted," Zaph confirmed, watching the effect of his words on her. "No man touches you but me, or I walk away." Sue's surrender was immediate and complete, a capitulation that surprised even Zaph in its totality. "Okay," she agreed, her voice small but certain. No one else.